Hey everybody, welcome to Hollis Does Brunch here on this Sunday. Really appreciate y'all that are tuning in today. It's not going to be a regular brunch because these are not regular times. And I know that we all, in our ways, have been tapped into what's been happening on the ground across the United States of America, starting in Minneapolis, lifting up and holding the memory and the life of George Floyd so dearly, and his incredibly tragic and incredibly violent death at the hands of police, and what that incident has incited, even in this deeply critical age of COVID, where we've all been instructed for our own safety to stay inside. This week has showed that, in fact, there is no safety if we do not gather and we do not collect and we do not make a stand against state violence and for Black liberation and the movement for Black lives. So, we had some conversation internally because we did have a whole program decided upon today. Between all of us guests, we recognized that this was not the time to continue with business as normal or business as usual. And while it is important for us to dive into discourse about artist process, what is really critical at this time is to create space to talk about how we individually and collectively are going to come together at this moment to be better accountable, to ensure that we are in alignment with folks that are experiencing the brunt of this violence and the destruction that is largely propelled by the state, and to ensure that our critical lens is forever sharpening and that we're doing the education and we're doing the unsexy work to make sure that that's the case. So I would love for you guys, this is a conversation, not only with me and my guests, but also with y'all. Would love to hear and see y'all in the chat. Let me know where you guys are coming in from. And maybe express just what's on your heart right now. Like, do you have questions? What are your feelings? It'd be great to know how you're doing through all of this as we process and we share resources and tips and folks to better bring us together in our theory, in our philosophy, and in our coordinated action to better understand and to better be of support. So without much further ado, I'm going to bring on a really dear friend of mine who is an incredible artist and has a platform that is dedicated to self-development and self-discovery of artists. And he's been doing a lot of incredible authorship to think about how we can be present and mindful during this time of chaos and during this pandemic, but also during this moment of uprising. So without further ado, please welcome to Brunch, our dear friend, Jarrell Perry, AKA Yore.
Hey, Hollis.
Hi, how are you?
Hey, I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for being here and being down to be here from jump, but especially over the last 24 hours, being down to adapt our scheduled programming to more kind of cogently and poignantly speak to this moment.
Well, yeah, it's important. I think, Nina Simone said, it's an artist. She believed an artist's job was to reflect the times, and a lot of what my work centers around is the artist's journey from the inside out. And we can't really move forward in that work, in that inner work, without acknowledging what affects us on an everyday level, externally, and also just when it comes to our identity. I live with my identity as a Black man in America every day, and that's not something I necessarily put at the forefront of my work with Still Mind. It's mostly about me as an artist, as an individual in my journey through self-development. But the times will always intersect with what's going on with us individually. So I think it is important, and I have found a lot of solace in being able to share my experience and to let others know that they are not alone. And then they, in turn, it's like a feedback loop. I feel that I am no longer alone, and we can share our resources in not only taking care of ourselves, but also taking action.
Absolutely. And I think it's that dialogue and that dynamic of taking action and taking steps, but also knowing how to care and sustain self, and to be in touch with self. I think that this is a critical time for and it, you know, it's not binary by any means, but I think we're all in this place of self-examination and self-reflection. And I think that as a non-Black person, I think what we're all examining is, in what ways have I tacitly, complacently, passively benefited from a system where the status quo harms and kills Black people in this country, and was actually built to do that, and has been enacted and perfected to continue that inequity. And I think that level of self-reflection can be very startling for folks. And I think that a lot of things have come today that really make us think about what, you know, over the last week, like, what are our values? Like, what do we hold true, and who are we accountable to, and who do we hold dear? And what are we willing to give up for a
Right.
more just world? And I think that these questions are hard because we haven't necessarily collectively had to answer them. And so we're going to get into that a little bit. I'm seeing you. Hey, Sarah, thank you so much for joining us. And I'm so glad that you're here with us.
Hey,
So
Sarah.
Yore, if you could just let us know a little bit more about you as a musician, as well as what Still Mind is. And then I would love to see what you prepared for us for brunch.
Sure. Yeah. So, hi everyone. My name is Yore. I also have a platform called Still Mind. I've been doing music for over 10 years, and Hollis has been actually a really close collaborator with me. And the Yore project began in 2018, just as a completely new journey for me, and really reflecting just a nostalgia for what could have been. Like that's kind of the mantra that I've been moving forward in terms of my artistic voice, and it's always been informed by a sense of self-reflection and self-discovery, and all of that really stemmed from, you know, a breakdown and a breakthrough. I think that's actually something that's relevant to what's going on right now. You know, you have to face some challenges and some rock bottoms and some wake up moments in your personal life, and I feel like we're facing that as a nation right now. But yeah, with Still Mind, I started writing basically my journey about 5 years ago, after really struggling in my career as an artist, and moving and navigating through an industry that was not kind, and really having to stand up for what I believed in for myself. And I realized I didn't really know what was going on with myself. So I really started to dive into the world of self-development and spiritual work and internal work. And that takes many different shapes and forms as we grow. Like, it could be meditation, it could be, you know, finding spiritual communities, reading, study, journaling, finding a therapist, finding a coach, and also just having conversations like this, like authentic conversations, empathic conversations with people who are safe and open. And, you know, I consider Hollis to be one of those people. And I was having those kind of safe, open dialogues with a lot of artists, and I wanted to take that and move it online. So that's what Still Mind is about, stillmind.co. And then you can also find my music at This Is Yore. Hollis and I have actually written a song together that it's basically today it's a year since it came out. So Desperate Measures, which is great, celebrating that. As far as what I'm cooking today, I've made a baked oatmeal. Check it out. It's like a
Yo, that
crumble.
looks great.
Yeah, the presentation. So basically, it's oats, and you start off with an apple. Cut up some apple, throw it in some water, hot water, get it softened for a couple of minutes, and then you throw in cinnamon and oats. Let it all kind of meld together, like into your typical porridge thing. And then the flip on it is you pour it into like a pan, and then put it in the oven for 20-25 minutes at 400 degrees. You can like even crumple up some like cookies or biscuits or something on top, or a little brown sugar, and then you top it with more apple, dried cranberries. What else is on here? I think these are hemp hearts, Yeah, so
I'm parched.
this is what it's about.
It's looking, wait, hold on, just
My
keep that
vegan,
holding. I'm about to solo you.
yeah.
Now that is inspo. That is gold.
And
That
of
is
course, coffee, black coffee, out of the French press.
awesome.
Yeah.
Great. Well, for brunch, I didn't really have time with all of our navigation of today and making sure that we're doing our due diligence to cook anything inspired. But I would like to give my homegirl Angie a shout out for making these gluten-free, dairy-free, I believe it's a lemon blueberry muffin. And
Nice.
I'm going to hit it with some Earth Balance vegan. They should really sponsor me because I be plugging the vegan
Yeah, I feel
butter.
like I didn't even know about vegan butter until
I am
Hollis
into
does
vegan
brunch.
butter. And it like this consistency is the same. Like it's bomb. I'm gonna just like literally just nope. hmm Delicious. So
Cheers.
thanks again to yeah, so cheers. Hey Yoshino. So thanks again so much for y'all for joining us. And as you can see, scrolling on the bottom, what we're doing is donating to Black Visions Collective. Wanted to give you a little introduction of what Black Visions Collective is. So really quickly. So Black Visions Collective is an organization that's based on the ground in Minneapolis. And their commitment is to create the conditions for long-term success and transformation. And so what they do, they're not only a queer and trans Black-led organization, but they do equal parts activism on the ground movement work. And they also are really involved in doing policy. So they see healing justice and transformative justice at the center of the work that they do. And the campaigns that they run are really thinking about how not only can we mobilize on the streets to declare what our values are as a community and how society needs to be restructured, but as they say here, visioning and leading targeted collaborative local campaigns that advance a concrete impact for people's lives while advancing a shift in public narrative that connects to transformative long-term change. And so what they're doing is, in addition to movement organizing, they're also doing the work to make sure that the budgets of our government, of our states and local governments, reflect the values that we hold as community. And I think that that has a lot to do with the actions that are happening now and what we're seeing, and the violence that we're seeing right now is that there is an outsized investment in the militarization of the police. And when the police have those resources, the ways that they enact it are as though they're going to war with their own citizens, tax-paying citizens, communities that contribute towards the cost of keeping our society supposedly protected and safe. But of course, the question now that comes to light is safe for who?
Hmm.
Protection for who? And I think a lot of what I'm learning quickly in terms of just like what we're seeing right now and the issues that are coming to light, the first is that we're really forced to choose what we believe to be valuable and what our values are and who and what we value. And I think when we see destruction of property or theft, and that sparks more outrage than the ongoing and continued dehumanization, abuse, and murder at the hands of police, of Black people and Indigenous people, it really brings to light what are we more interested in protecting, and what, to whom does civility serve, to whom does order serve, and what does this order protect? I think further, it's like this is really bringing to light. I think if you go to and you hear on the ground, I know here in LA, up in Seattle, many of the protests that organizers gather, and these are organizers who have been doing the work, that have been going to city council meetings and been legislating and been doing direct action. The protests that people gather on are largely peaceful, right? It's people that are coming together to find community and be together. And what we see is the inciting of violence by the police. And why? Because they've been built to protect some and to penalize and criminalize others. And that's baked so firmly in the DNA that it makes it so that it's largely impossible for police forces to be, like actors of goodwill actors. We just don't see it. They were built to uphold an order for some and not for all, right? And so I think a lot of the activism work that we're looking at right now, in addition to supporting bail funds for folks that are in prison that have been, or in jail rather, that have been arrested due to these actions, and supporting people who have been injured and maimed. Like, we're seeing horrible pictures of even reporters being shot with rubber bullets and being scarred. There's one photojournalist who lost her left eye in the protests in Minneapolis yesterday. But I think what we're seeing too is that it has to be equal parts supporting what's happening urgently on the ground right now. But we also need to really start doing the groundwork now, to thinking about how do we defund, how do we put our money where our mouth is, right? How do we have values that value people over profit, and people over property, and people over state violence, and people over an order that works for some and not for all? And how are we going to make sure that our city budgets, and that our city, whether that's the DA or people in elected office, are truly accountable to the people, and truly accountable to the most marginalized, and not accountable to the police? Like here in Los Angeles, for example, it's 54% of LA's budget goes to the LAPD force or to the sheriff's office. And it's just, what are our values when such an outsized amount of money is going towards funding? We were talking about how hospitals are running GoFundMes for personal protective equipment, but you see tanks and the latest shiny gadgets roll through the streets as soon as there's an action, and you realize where the money is truly going. What are we valuing, and what does protection look like there?
Right, and that's not by accident, Hollis.
No,
like,
at all.
I think it's really important. I think that's a really important point that you made, that we're asking the police to be accountable, but who are the police accountable to? It's to our government and our politicians. And who are they accountable to? It's to whoever's funding their campaigns and funding the government.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, like, for me, something that I think is important is really for us to normalize talking about and identifying white supremacy. I think that obviously, just given who is currently elected to be the president of our country, and the groundswell of white supremacy that has become popularized and associated with a populist movement, we've been able to see it more to light. But I think that a lot of our critique needs to be about understanding how we all, in our ways, I'm speaking to non-Black people, right? How we all, in our ways, allow for white supremacy to be perpetuated, because white supremacy actually is the infrastructure upon which this country is built. And this goes back to kind of a credo that I see written often on social media right now, which is like, it's not enough to be not racist. You must be anti-racist. And so too, I feel that same way. It's not enough to be against white supremacy. It's not enough to think that white supremacy is bad. It's about actively challenging and dismantling white supremacy, and knowing that it is a fact, that isn't just somebody who's wearing a red hat, or somebody whose family was a Ku Klux Klan member and is advocating for a type of like Jim Crow style segregation. It actually is like woven inextricably into the fabric of this nation, into all of the systems in which some of us benefit and others do not. And I think the more that we normalize and see white supremacy in this country, the easier it will be to identify it and start to transform it into a society that's more equitable. But at the end of the day, that comes to centering the most marginalized. And again, like back to the previous question that I think a lot of us are holding, it's about, a lot of us have had an outsized privilege and an outsized benefit from living in this society. And what are we willing to give up? And what comforts are we willing to peel away from ourselves? We're seeing a lot of, your silence will not protect you. And that's true. But I think a lot of people are protected. And I can count myself within that, So I think a lot of it is just like, how are we challenging every day, and also seeing ourselves as a part of it? I'm looking at the chat really quick and saying, hi, Aldia. Hi, Jahan. Hi, Angana. Thank you, Dressage, for joining us. I'm really heartened by that. And remember, you can always hit the Venmo at Hollis-Ware, just so that we can give a collective gift at the end of brunch and be all together. So I'm curious, Yore, how are you processing and coping through all of this work, and where are you seeing yourself within it, and how has Still Mind become a platform for you?
Yeah, I think Thank you, Hollis, for everything that you said. I I feel a lot of emotions right now, um, and I feel like it's definitely hard to pinpoint it. You know, being a Black person in America, we know that this is not new. This is something that has been going on for centuries, and also now that we're seeing it in the news, you know, I try to have a balance of, you know, protecting my energy and protecting myself from seeing so many images of people who look like me dying at the hands of police and state sponsored violence. And I'm really trying to focus on empowerment and the resilience of our people and just restoration. So I think it is really important right now, and I am so glad to see non-Black folks speaking out a lot more at this point in time, because honestly, as Black people, we are exhausted and we are tired. And you know, I could share the experiences of my life, walking through white spaces and living in white neighborhoods and being targeted and not being welcome and having my life feel threatened and be threatened by this society and by this country in a way that is very personal. But the truth is, the I can only speak so much that people are willing to hear. It's time for other people, non-Black folks, to speak out on our behalf, because you know we've seen that the voices of Black folks can only go so far, and they have been silenced up till now. So it's really important to have allies and to have that solidarity and to have people be able to do the work and to also be willing to give up something, because these are the power structures that are in place and that do benefit some at the expense of others. And so it really is a time to say, you know, which side are you on, and what are you willing to do if you say that this is what you're about, which is about freedom and equality and the liberation of all people. It definitely takes it's going to take work and a sustained effort along the way. And speaking of sustainability, you know, that's a lot of the work that I do, that I center in my journal in Still Mind, is just how do I move through this life, not only as just an individual human being, as an artist, as a person of color. You know, how do I move through and also uplift the people around me and take action and be able to do so in a healthy way, in a way that I can um, continue to do for days and weeks and years on end. You know, and I think it's important to really take the time to have tools and to share tools. Some of the things that I've been doing is just pouring into myself with YouTube videos of movement leaders from the past and Black art and things that really empower me. Things that will counteract the images that I see in the media and that I see online, because all of that really takes a toll on you. And I do have this belief that what you focus on expands. So while it's important, you know, for me individually, it's important to take a look at what's going on, and we must face the horror that's been going on. You know, I know that personally. So I need to pour into myself positive images as well, to expand and take breaks from the news and be mindful of the information that I'm taking in, and just basically be mindful of my media diet, and not necessarily surrender to this endless scroll of Twitter and all of that. Another thing that I've been doing is just trying to remember that I can do the best that I can in my own way. And so I would also offer that up to anyone in the chat as well. Like, how are you moving forward? If you're not showing up to a protest, are you donating to the organizations that are supporting the protest? Can you make a meal? Can you call a friend? Can you use your art, your talent to spread a message that is uplifting to Black people, and just knowing that it's not going to be one way for everyone. Like, we all have our role and our position to play. So just choose yours and sit in that and be confident in that. Another couple of things I've been doing is just the general self-care things, like meditating, journaling, going for walks, making sure I'm taking care of my physical activity. And then I've been following a few Black wellness practitioners and educators as well. I can show you, I'm gonna do, Hollis, would this be a good time to do my screen share?
Yeah, I think that'd be great.
Yeah, so this is the site Stillmind. Feel free to go to @StillMindCo to follow. You can also sign up for the email list where I will be journaling weekly. A lot of these journal entries are really based on my experience in pursuing mindful living and restorative justice in real time. So this is a recent article I wrote. This was before everything popped off. How to live when you feel like you're not doing enough. I also have an article down here, 11 ways to calm down quickly in 2020. Things like breathing, queuing up a nostalgic song. Like, I don't know if you've ever remembered like a song that your mom or dad would be playing when they were cleaning the house on a Saturday morning, like those kind of songs, that nostalgic music, just to like get you out of your head and feel better. Donate to a cause or a person in need, which we're doing today. These are some of the tips and the tools that I'm sharing here on Still Mind. I'm also following Black and people of color who are practitioners of wellness and educators when it comes through Black liberation. So this is one of them, Rachel Cargill. Also, We the Urban. And this is what I'm talking about when I say just messages that are uplifting. Layla Delia, who's a writer and a spiritual wellness educator, has also been really good for me. Whatever you're feeling now, tomorrow, or in the days after, be sure to return to yourself by the end of each day to energetically cleanse and mentally restore. This is how we take our power back. These are the kind of messages that I want to continue to pour into myself to maintain some sense of sustainability in this fight. I will speak lover and fighter in the same breath and in alternating ones. This is Seher, another wellness practitioner, woman of color that I follow. So yeah, those are just a few of the tips, and I always open it up to the floor because it is about having that dialogue and sharing. You know, what's helping you? How can we help each other? Because this is not just today, not just tomorrow. This is like for the long haul. So it's really important that we stick together in this and continue to develop ourselves individually and collectively.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for those. And I'm actually dropping each of those accounts in the chat right now. I think on the fly, copy and pasting. All right, dropped in the chat. And I just want to say, fuck Facebook and fuck Mark Zuckerberg, like for real.
Right.
But unfortunately, and until we build a new alternate world, we are on the chat. we're on Instagram. And, you know, I think it's unfortunately really problematic that we have to go through these. Like, I think that, like, that's in and of an example when I talk about like seeing white supremacy, like, in action. Like, Trump is clearly a white supremacist, but like Facebook is white supremacist and Mark Zuckerberg is a white supremacist for upholding the status quo and order and pandering to those in power at the expense of the truth. And that's just what it is, you know? And I think that it's just the more that we can clearly identify these, and it sucks because sometimes you have to like interact with these systems because they do connect us and they do educate us. And they do bring us together. But at the same time, it's just thinking about like, the time has come for us to like create alternate systems. And what does it look like for us to gather? That's not the easiest way. Cause I think a lot of, you know, people have talked about this social media, just like, you know, it occupies our time. It lives inside of our head, and it in many ways it can disable us. So how are we choosing a feed that is enabling and educating of us, and also kind of providing those resources of self-care and self-reflection, but not getting sucked into the trap of, you know, just getting so inundated with social media and these systems that are ultimately owned, and ultimately are white supremacist.
Yeah.
And that's what that is. So I wanted to share, and that's well that. Oh yeah, great. Thank you, Adriel, for this recommendation. Angel Kyoto Williams's book, Radical Dharma. I love that. And thank you guys so much. We've had some really awesome donations, and we're going to have a really dope total at the end of this. So I really appreciate you tuning in. So really quickly, I wanted to share some thought leaders. They're all actually queer Black women that I have been following, that have really given me a sense of like just how to be led, because I think a lot of it is understanding that we can connect to the platforms and then do our best to amplify the insights and the wisdoms of people who are on the ground organizing. So the first person I wanted to shout out is Patrisse Cullors. Patrisse is a co-founder of Black Lives Matter, and she's been an activist since her high school years here in Los Angeles. She not only is a co-founder of Black Lives Matter, but she also founded Dignity and Power Now, which passed a truly historic referendum this past election cycle here in Los Angeles, calling for the accountability of the sheriff's department, which has been deeply murderous and never held accountable. We're also here in LA supporting to get the current DA, Jackie Lacey, out of office, as she has demonstrated herself to be very protective of state violence and police murder. And I think these are the kind of fights, no matter where you're tuning in from, there's people on the ground that are advocating for reform. And it's like, how can you plug into that work? Because that is just as important as showing up to a protest. So what I love about Patrisse's content, I really recommend that you check out this video. She recorded this last night after the protest and was talking about how the LA protests were so beautiful and life-giving and healing until the cops arrived, right? And I think also I really, really loved what you shared here. Let's be honest, Black pain, grief, and rage are not only dismissed by elected officials, our response to those feelings are also criminalized. To feel is the most fundamental human desire, yet we are consistently punished for expressing our feelings and our desires. I desperately want us to feel and be free, but this country's existence is predicated on our lack of freedom. The only way y'all get to be free is if Black folks are unfree. And that shit is truly painful. And I feel like that spoke directly to the core of this country, while we've been often conditioned to believe a narrative of liberty and justice for all. Anybody can make it in America. And I think especially those of us from immigrant backgrounds have been especially inundated with that, because we've felt like we had to prove our Americanness by participating in the American vision. But the more you learn about history, the more you realize that the American vision is actually predicated on the oppression and enslavement of some for the benefit of others. And that's that on that. The second person I want to shout out is Nikita Oliver. Nikita is an activist that's fighting on the ground in Seattle. I know we got a couple Seattle folks in the building. Nikita is always on the front lines, and she's always like bringing integrity and strength and knowledge as an educator and as an activist. And I think she says it really well here. She always is really thoughtful about moving in alignment with Indigenous communities as well, and recognizing the Coast Salish people and the Indigenous folks of Seattle. So she says, defund the police and give those resources to community, especially Black and Native communities. We ain't seen a dime of reparations, no pay for our stolen labor, nor our stolen land, but the police have been funded millions and millions a year to catch and kill us for 100 plus years. So she's somebody that I really recommend you guys follow. I love Sonia Renee Taylor. Sonia Renee Taylor is a poet and an activist that I've had the great privilege to know for a number of years. And she just puts together these really, really incredible videos where she's speaking from the heart. And she really calls, she calls folks to task, right? So I think like this was a video that I would really recommend everybody watch, which is called Don't Ask What You Can Do to Help Unless You're Down to Do This. Until white people become willing to put their bodies on the line for the purpose of justice, there is no point asking, what can I do? Because what you really mean is, what can I do that will not disrupt my comfort, access, resource, or safety? What can I do that is easy? Stop asking what you can do if you are unwilling in your cis, able-bodied white flesh to use your privilege and positional power to intervene against the police state. And I hear that as a non-Black person, I'm of mixed ancestry. It's like, that's something that I hear loud and clear is, what are we willing to do? We say we want to help, but we want to help from the comfort of our homes. We want to help without inconveniencing ourselves or losing opportunities. And it's hard now, right? Because we're in a place of scarcity. I think a lot of us are scrambling and trying to figure out what we can do in all of this. But it's really just about, and she shares some insights here. I really had to like watch this a couple of times, which was like, far too many white folks act when asked to do something about white supremacist violence. It's so specific and so literal as to never have to do anything. Join a direct action group, join or start showing up for a racial justice chapter in your community, right? So yeah, and then, one person that somehow went away. So I want to shout out Raquel Willis really quickly. She's a trans writer that lives in New York. And what I really love about her insight is that she comes from a journalist perspective. I follow her on Twitter specifically at Raquel Willis, and I really highly recommend that you follow her. She always has some really great insight, is always holding people accountable and to task. And it's just a really brilliant mind. She was national organizer for the Trans Law Center and also a journalist. So big shout outs to Raquel. And then lastly, I wanted to recommend that you all follow Ijeoma Oluo, who is also a Seattle-based activist and author. And she just really has some poignant insights that are always really great to hold, both that she amplifies and also that she's written. So those are folks that I feel like are really great to support. And then I wanted to shout out really quickly some books. So starting with actually Ijeoma's book herself. So you want to talk about race. If you are feeling really like, whoa, this is all really new to me and I don't really know where to start, this is a really, really fantastic starting point. I'm going to solo myself, so Jarrell, you don't have to. So you want to talk about race by Ijeoma Oluo is a really great, not only book for those who feel overwhelmed and want to have like a strong foundation, but this is also a really fantastic entry-level book that you can recommend to your parents, to your siblings, to your boss, to your coworkers. I've seen a lot of conversation about the music industry having a blackout on Tuesday to better be accountable to our communities, and yet I have seen no action as to what that actually entails. One thing that could happen is that everybody could commit to reading and discussing this book, as it is a book that's really written to start conversation for folks that feel uneasy or unsure about how to start that conversation off. The second book that I'd like to recommend, and this is kind of on the 101 stuff, but I read this recently and I found it really impactful. Obviously, it's a movie that recently came out as well, but Just Mercy is really an exploration of one man's exploration as a criminal defense attorney about how deeply stacked the criminal justice system is against Black people, how it really ruins and destroys people's lives through just really arbitrary notions of who justice serves. So Just Mercy by Brian Stevenson. This book, I feel like if you like, I read Just Mercy, I read So You Want to Talk About Race, like I'm ready for like a true historical scaffolding to build my understanding of how we got to this place. This book was incredibly illuminating for me. And yeah, it's not super sexy, right? We're not talking about civil rights stuff. We're talking about the re-enslavement of Black Americans from the Civil War to World War II. But what you realize in this book is that policing and jailing was created as a substitution for slavery because the South was so shocked and surprised by the the ending of slavery, that they had to cobble together a system in order to maintain white supremacy and maintain Black labor. And that's what policing is, and that's what jailing is. Like, this criminal justice system is built to be a continuation of slavery. And you learn that in this book in a really thorough and terrible, and like, you cannot unlearn this shit way. This I recommend highly, highly. And then the last book I'm going to recommend is actually a book that I have never read. And it's a book that people have recommended to me greatly. And it's the same, on the same tip of understanding how slavery and capitalism have come together, and why when we see the destruction of capitalist property, people get so upset, because what they see is the destruction of white supremacy that is built to protect so many people. And really understanding why capitalism and racism are so intrinsically linked, and why racism was created to protect capitalism. And I am going to challenge folks in this chat and otherwise to read this book with me. This is a book that I'm going to be diving into next. I want to hold myself accountable to my own education and make sure that I'm being the most educated and the most thoughtful ally and accomplice that I can be in this work. So, The Half That Has Never Been Told by Edward Baptist. This book, sorry, I should always be shouting out the authors. So this is Douglas A. Blackman, and he won a Pulitzer Prize for this shit. This was Brian Stevenson, and then this was Ijeoma Oluo. And if you have other recommendations for books, I know that Adriel dropped one in the chat. I'm reading, Radical Dharma, and then I'm just looking really quick to see. Let me bring you back, Jarrell. I'm seeing Johan say, having difficult combos with non-Black people, I love to get them to begin to understand or continue to remind them of the deep rot of our political system and how it perpetuates the truly systemic issue. And I think a lot of what we're doing is unlearning this narrative that this country has been built to be equitable. And I think a lot of us who are women, who are people of color, and especially Black and especially Indigenous people, know that to not be true. But it's safer to uphold this concept. I think we see in real time the crumbling of this narrative that America is the greatest nation in the world. We see it from the top down. But what is truly redeeming about all of this is what's rising from the bottom up. Exactly. Yeah. Assata taught us, Assata, I think also just like learning about the Black Panther movement and learning about the movements in the past that have laid the groundwork for today are so important.
And Hollis, thank you for those recommendations. And I'd also say that I think a lot of people, they can easily have a cop out by saying, oh my God, like books, like I don't read, or this sounds really heavy and really academic. Okay, well, why don't you just like Google the authors and see what else is out by the authors, like see what kind of articles have been written, see what kind of interviews they've done. Like, we're on the internet, there's so many different forms and ways of media to be educated in. So I would just say, like, it's not an excuse to, if you're not like a quote unquote like reader, you can always look up and research around the authors themselves, other kinds of media that work for you.
That's important. And I would also say, I think just figuring out how to make it accessible is very important, but also reading a book is the least you can do to support the dismantling. It's actually pretty fucking easy. And like, that's what Sonia said. It's not fucking easy. I'm sorry. It's demonstrating my nerd privilege. But I mean, it is something that, like, ultimately, I think that's a great idea, is just, and to follow these authors too, right? And not to feel like you have to just like read 10 books and then you're allowed to be back in the conversation. It's like, this is an ongoing discourse. I love this comment. Books take time. Change takes time. We need leaders with the patience and the grit to do the work consistently over time. Thank you so much, DJ All-Star, for saying that. That's really brilliant. We got so many donations. I'm like really hype. I'm just going to shout people out in the chat right now. I was doing it written, but hold up. Let me open this up. Let me open up what we got. I want to shout out Christine Geronimo for donating, Teal DeVille for donating, Paula Perry. We love you, Paula. Yours, Mom.
That's my mom.
We love Paula. Aaron Samuels, who also gives me, as he would, a recommendation to better improve my programming. I love you, Aaron. And I will share a roundup of all the IG accounts to follow for sure. Thank you, Zerna. Thank you, Erica. Thank you, Diane Sparks. Thank you, Toby Crittenden. Thank you, Angana Barther. And thank you, Jacob Galfano. And thank you, Connie Lim, for donating. I'm really excited to add all this up and see how much we were able to raise for folks that are on the ground, not only doing the movement organizing work, but also doing the work to create change in the budgets and the way in which we invest in the police state. So it's all about defunding and really understanding, like, what does it mean to abolish the systems that were built to perpetuate the legacy of slavery? I think that's a lot of what we're grappling with, and recognizing what our individual contribution is to that. Jarrell, I'm wondering, I'm going to do some like mathematics to see how much we raised, but I'm curious if both of you have any final thoughts, or if the people in the crowd have any questions for Jarrell and Stillmind.
Any questions, shout them out. I just want to say thank you again, Hollis, for creating this space and making a platform that is both challenging and safe and accountable for all of us to work together, especially non-Black folks, to dismantle. That's really what we're doing, to dismantle white supremacy and this police state. So yeah.
Love it. Jarrell, would you like to perform for us as a conclusion?
Yeah, sure. I thought I would just do a little, since usually the programming of Hollis's Brunch includes some kind of performance or artist exhibition. I thought I would sing a little bit a cappella of a song that Hollis and I wrote together for the Yore project that came out a year ago. It's called Desperate Measures. I didn't mean to call you up out of nowhere, but nowhere is where I've been. I thought I'd find myself in time, but time is what brought me here. I tried to drown you out, but somehow I'm the one who's gasping. I tried to sweep you under, but somehow you stay on the surface. Oh, thread by thread, I stay tethered, count each day with desperate measures. Ooh, desperate measures. Ooh, desperate measures. Thank you.
Yay, everybody. Drop your applauses, hearts, and ones in the chat for Yore. And you can check out Yore. This is Yore. Please keep Yore's music. I loved writing that song with you, and I'm so thankful that you sang it. I love your voice. I love your spirit. I love your intention to your craft. And I just love you.
Thank you. I just love you. Thank you.
I am really excited to report that my math sucks and I need to add this up, but I am absolutely confident to say that we raised $1,500 today for Black Vision Collective, which is probably 3 times as much as my aspiration for this. I am so thankful to each of you for putting, whether you gave money or not, just being present through this conversation, being down to learn. I'm so moved, and I'm so thankful that what we could do today and gather is something that can be contributed to folks on the ground, thinking about what we're willing to sacrifice. And part of that is, the funds that we have in our bank account. Until there's systemic reparations in this country, we all have to feel accountable to do what we can to bringing that to light. So yeah, thank you so much for donating $1,500 to Black Vision. I'm really excited and really moved for that. And this is such a troubling time, and but in some ways it's the least troubling because everything is out in the open as much as it can be, and it's all about pushing at this point. I think about how we gain momentum about things, and then it's easy to lose it because we get exhausted or fatigued or uncertain about where next to go. But I am just so grateful that at least here in our little corner of the internet on Brunch, we can connect. And so, yeah, I'm going to put, to Erin's point, I love you, Erin. Thank you for being here. I'm putting, again, the Instagrams of the people that Jarrell talked about in the chat. And then I'm going to drop the handles of the folks that I mentioned today right here as well. So that's Osea Patrice, Nikita Oliver, Ijeoma Oluo, and Raquel Willis, and Sonia Renee Taylor. Let me make sure I have her. Sorry, this is inelegant, but it's important information to the people. Yeah, Sonia Renee Taylor. All right, so there's all the accounts. Please follow. Thank you guys so much for joining us. Yore, you got any last parting thoughts?
That's amazing. This is great. Yeah,
I'm so thankful. So thankful for all of you and for our community. And, you know, this brunch series moving forward, the whole point of it was for us to feel less alone during a really critical time. And now I think more than ever, it's important for us to gather. And I'm going to do my part to make sure that this platform can be a place where we can continue to learn and grow together and be accountable to one another. And I am, just so thankful for you, Yore, and so thankful for all of you here.
Hollis, and everyone in the chat. Yeah, feel free to reach out to us on wherever the platforms, you know, you see the handles, and also I'm at info@stillmind.co. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Love you all. Take care. Stay safe. Stay connected.
Take care.
Plug in. And fuck white supremacy. All right. Bye, y'all.